Again, welcome everyone. Good afternoon, and I hope your day has been good so far. And what I would like to do with this hour together is leave you a bit more well prepared to make proper and effective use of some form of biological product. We call it, in this case, biostimulants, um, and or better and more prepared to ask effective questions of people who would supply them to you or encourage you to use them. What Cassie has asked me to do is kind of set the table briefly with some prepared comments on the topic, and then we will open it up to wide discussion. But I want to emphasize that at this from the very beginning, that you're welcome to interrupt me. You're welcome to use the chat with a question, or comment. You're welcome to submit a comment or question in the chat feature, which I think Cassie is going to be watching, and she can alert me to that. But don't hesitate. Please don't hesitate to speak up in whatever manner suits you in terms of getting the input that you're seeking. So again, we're talking a bit about the expectations and outcomes that can be expected using biostimulants. Okay. We'll focus on these 4 categories that you see here. I'm hoping that you're seeing my slides at this point. I just want to confirm that. Okay. We'll focus first on the categories and a tiny bit on the regulation and their use and handling. We're really here to talk about you in whatever capacity that you're functioning: farmer, grower, farmer advisor, somehow interested party, maybe a biostimulant supplier, whatever your particular capacity. What we're really focused on here in the next 20 minutes, actually to the full hour, is you're becoming more effective with these products in some way. So we really want to focus on that as being the outcome. And so therefore we'll keep it to the practical, if you will. And we'll focus a bit on experimenting with and assessing and experimenting with these products and assessing their effectiveness and the value to you in whatever way that you would be interested in. Some background is just from the start, it's important to acknowledge that the supply of biostimulants has become and is an enormous business, and it's only projected to increase. You can see here at the far right of that graph the year 2030, and at that time, this particular market research estimates that the testing of biostimulants will be a $4.6 billion business by the year 2030. That's a pretty significant increase, and you see the steady growth since just 2022, and then the projections. And we have data that goes back farther than that to suggest that trend line has only been going up. In January, just this past issue of the Vegetable Growers News magazine that I kind of follow, you see the quote here, an announcement that there's a consortium. A consortium has been put together to study your, as a grower or growers' responses to perspectives on biological products. So this company wants to understand everyone's perspective, most especially potential end users' perspectives on these products. And of course, that's a big deal. You can also see clear evidence of the same going on if you were to attend programs like the one that's shown here coming up in March. These are commonplace anymore, where a group primarily of industry people gather to trade their experiences and projections, and they are doing so over usually a multi-day period. Some are fun. I was at the Middle Atlantic Fruit Vegetable Convention the last 4 days, and here I'm pointing out in the organic vegetable production session, which I was a part of in the afternoon. In the morning part of that same session, we had Dr. Carly Reagan from Certis Biologicals on the program talking about using biologicals effectively. So this is just yesterday, as a matter of fact, in Hershey, Pennsylvania. But this is a portion of my prepared comments where I get to say that if you wanted to, you could take a year or more long workcation and attend a conference on biological products nearly in nearly every sector of the world at some point. Go to Orlando, San Diego, Milan, Italy, Valencia, Spain, back to Miami. Oh, head out to Chicago. Oh, Barcelona, you got to pick up Barcelona somewhere along the way. Where are some of the other ones? But Canada, the Netherlands, Denmark, it keeps going. You could
working on a grant for that, Matt?
Yeah, we're gonna put together a grant for that. We're gonna hop skip across the world. You could have hop skip across the world in the last 5 to 8 years, nearly nonstop, and had legitimate reasons for being there as you went from place to place to learn more about what everyone is saying about biostimulants. Here, Dublin, Ireland. Sorry, I should have forgotten Dublin and Rome. And again, back in Barcelona. Portland, Oregon. If you've ever been to Portland, Oregon, you can go out to could have gone to Portland. What's the point of all this? All the people who go to these programs, typically in the hundreds, representing multiple companies, all joking aside, they're gathering for a reason. They're spending significant amounts of money to gather, to discuss their business. That business rests on the backs of the people who currently buy or are expected to buy and use these products. That's truly an important message for folks in this discussion and others that you know to appreciate. Again, we're kind of being glib about this wortification, but the message is a serious one. These people are gathering specifically to strategize, to compare notes, to assess the status and the potential future, because their livelihoods depend on it. And with the projected spending of $4.6 billion just to test biological products in the making, that clearly suggests that quite a few people are assuming that quite a few farmers and others will be interested in using these products in some way and with some degree of regularity. Ohio State University's digital ag presence, part of the college's digital ag presence. You will start to see reports in eFields if you're an eFields reader. You'll start to see on-farm reports of on-farm research being conducted with these products. If you look at my website, you'll see the same with some of the products that we have tested in organic systems and transitional organic systems. And that was just that's just a bit of background to kind of set the stage for there's a lot of money being spent, a lot of money expected to be spent, and all that derives from the expected current and expected use of the products going forward. But what are they? What are we actually here to talk about? That's at some level. It's described in this graphic here, and although we cannot study this in detail, we don't have the time for it. We can refer to it back to it as we need. You see that there are microbials in one sector, acids in another, a category called other, and then extracts. And you see the many different types. Some of these you may recognize. And I would ask if you are willing, you already did one survey, but I would just ask if you're willing to use your responses feature in your Zoom. Just show a thumbs up or something if you've used any of the products that any product that you've used, you recognize it in this graphic. People are just willing to give a thumbs up if they've seen it. Like, oh yeah, I've used polyamines, or I've used a protein, or I've used a vitamin or humic, or so. Okay, but this is what the landscape currently includes, and it's only diversifying as we speak. There are two broad categories. One category is used for biocontrol. These products are expected to have a direct effect or an indirect, pretty much a direct effect on insect or disease. They're supposed to be a control function. They're regulated by the EPA because they have an EPA label. And there are typically much data behind their use and effectiveness. That data set includes third-party data. In other words, data collected by people with no skin in the game, no financial incentive to report positive results or negative results. So, and that is often the university testing, but not exclusively. So the biocontrol agents and the biocontrol sector of the whole biological market is a different sector in a meaningful way. It has this regulatory component long-standing within it, because the products need to have an EPA label. Whereas on the biostimulant side, it's not so much the same. There's typically far less third-party testing. They're usually meant to have an indirect effect on insects, diseases, and perhaps a more direct effect on the plants. It's not as well regulated, and like I said, there are far less data, pro or con, about the effectiveness of the products. Very importantly, in the most recent Farm Bill, biostimulants were defined. And it's really difficult to regulate, control, manage, discuss anything without a name, right? One needs a name, and the name needs to have a meaning, and it needs to be interpreted similarly across all sectors for any sort of process that would work on behalf of the end user to be effective. So we now have a definition of a plant biostimulant in official USDA language, in official USDA documents. That to many signals the coming of regulation. The coming of, you cannot just put anything out on the market unless there's some efficacy, something along those lines is just one example, okay? So that's a very big step. And there are two organizations, as you see represented here, excuse me, Biostimulant, the USDA, but also the Biostimulant Coalition, and what's called BPIA, the Biostimulant Council within the Fertilizer Institute, that is kind of working on people's behalf, the whole industry's behalf, to ensure some degree of reliability, predictability, accountability within the biostimulant sector, for sure, as defined by USDA. We looked into this a number of years ago. My team and I looked into this a number of years ago. You see that 2012 to 2022, and what we discovered is that, well, the market and revenue by product from over that 10-year period in millions of dollars just in the US is shown in this graphic. So again, if you just added this one to the one we showed earlier, both of them are steep upward trend lines. More and more money being spent on not only the use of, but also the testing of these different products. And here you have three different classes. We also, as a team, looked into that specific use within the OFA membership, the OFA certification group, and that was done completely with OFA's cooperation. It was all triple blind. We didn't know what farm it was. They didn't know what farm it was. It was all anonymized. All we were interested in discovering was, among the people who work with OFA for the certification, what is the use of biopesticide and biofertilizer use? And this is what we discovered. That together, at the bottom of your screen, you see biopesticide, the so-called biocontrol, and a biofertilizer. They accounted for 9% of all inputs on these farms. Nearly 10% of all inputs were some sort of biological product for biocontrol or biofertilization. A pretty significant commitment, it seems, at least among that cohort of growers. Their use is grounded in potential accepted biological principles and facts. They're not completely off, if you will. You know the term snake oil, and I hesitate to use it here, but it's familiar, but I want to qualify it. It's a derogatory term. It's a term that says, it's funny juice. It's just like, somebody's concoction. It doesn't really do anything. That's how some people look at the products, and that's unfortunate. It has also been earned at some level, and everyone's trying to get to the truth of the matter around biostimulant products. Their composition and the proposals, the projections about why they may work are often well grounded, but the question is, do they actually work? And that's what we're here to talk about specifically, which is a good segue into, gee, how does one select a product, use it, evaluate it, or advise people on their use? It's very difficult because, for a number of reasons, especially to establish clear guidelines for all of those steps and perspectives on a return on investment. And we'll get into the reasons here in just a short bit. One of them is, to be quite honest, most of the money in the industry sector is spent on discovering the product, active ingredient, formulating packaging, delivering the product, and then lesser amounts of energy and time are spent on field testing and helping people to actually optimize their use of the product. This is in direct not contradiction. It's the opposite with highly regulated materials like are used on conventional farms, where there's not only an EPA label, but an MSDS sheet, and it requires literally hundreds of millions of dollars to bring a product to market. There's safety involved, and so that right-hand arrow in that system is much larger than it is in many of the current biostimulant systems. So what about experimenting with these and assessing their value so we can get into our discussion before too long? This is a list of some of the issues that I have identified and others have identified along the way that can complicate assessments done by anyone of the effectiveness of biostimulants. One or more of these technical procedural issues will complicate the process, and it's just important to be aware of them going into that process so as to address them as effectively as possible, and also to see the data or the response, the observations in the correct light, if you will, to put them in the correct context. We do not have time today at this moment anyway. I don't want to take time to go down this list. I just wanted to introduce it, emphasize that they're at work more or less with almost any product, some more than others, and that it will be important if you are serious about assessing the ROI, return on investment, for use of a product, and maximizing, I should say, that ROI. These are some of the issues that you may encounter in that process. And as far as how that could unfold, how could that unfold? Especially, in this discussion within the context of this organic farmer researcher network, right? How would that fold? How would one approach experimenting with a biostimulant? Well, I think it begins with the basics, and we've learned some of those in a previous presentation in this series from Practical Farmers of Iowa as one example. That was a great session. I think it's recorded, Cassie, if that's correct, so people can go back and look at that. So of course, it was also about PFI, but the presenter did an excellent job with highlighting some examples of how they conduct their on-farm research. You also have terrific guides from the Organic Farming Research Foundation and of course from SARE. So whether it was a biostimulant or some other process or product, I personally, if I were to start an on-farm research endeavor, I would be looking at one or all of these guides as my foundational, touchstone, if you will, to just understand, keep me between the white lines and keep me focused and positioning me to be most effective. Those are just three to start with. And then it would incorporate, again, this list, taking special care to address the ones that may be most at work in my particular situation. So as far as considerations when experimenting with these materials, assessing their effectiveness, these are the bullet points that I would recommend be considered. And I'm watching the time here carefully, so we have plenty of time for discussion. Do your homework. The OERDC, the Ocean Worcester Library has the phrase that's shown there in quotes. Good research begins in the library. It is entirely possible that somebody may have already done the work that you're contemplating. So if they have reported it, it should be available to you, and it would possibly save you an enormous amount of time and frustration and, money and effort if you were to draw from their report first. So
Matt, can I ask a question about that though?
Let's go back here. Yeah, what is your question?
So if somebody else has done this, I'm thinking about that list of possible complicating factors that you showed.
Right.
Even if somebody else has done that elsewhere and tested a specific product, is it worth kind of testing them out under your own conditions, your own cropping system, your own management practices?
It can be. It very well can be, and I think that's a national inclination. It is for many people to ask, well, it worked over there, does it work over here? Or did it work over there? Might it work over here?
So what could you pull out of somebody else's work that might be most useful, not like okay, it worked there, it'll work here, but like what kind of things would you want to look at that would transfer?
One of the things I look at very, very, very first is how did they do it? And what did they say about the outcomes? They may have a statement and they're like, we wish we would have done this, or we wish we would have done that. Or the next time we do this, we're going to do it this way. They may not come right out and say, we wish we would have done it differently, but they may say, the next time we do it, we're going to do it this way. And that's a signal that they think that there might be something going on with how they did it and its impact on what they observed, right? So some reports will be very generous in that way. They will be very forthcoming about their experience, and I would take that cue right away. That's very important. Another thing I would do, Cassie, before we move on to like examples of where to get these reports is if an experiment was done in Indiana or Pennsylvania, Ohio, I'm sorry, Michigan, or a place that's near yours, you can ask the question, yeah, they're over there, they're 200 miles away, so on and so forth. But ask, how different are they actually? Seriously, like how different is it? What are the differences exactly? Is it the soil type? Is it the temperature? Maybe not. Is it the rainfall? Maybe not. So some places far away can actually be kind of similar in broad stroke terms that would affect the outcome of a test. So I would not automatically dismiss something because it's quote X number of miles away. I would just not dismiss it. I would try to bring it into the context of my possible experiment by asking more about the methodology and the situation that they use. So to just quickly maybe wrap up that one part, every project funded by the USDA, every single one of them has to have a public facing report or reports, plural. They may be a tiny bit difficult to find, but they are there. Okay. So when I say, good research begins in the library, it's kind of true in the sense that get your hands on these reports. They're free, they're detailed, and they'll lay out quite a bit for you. And if you have any trouble with that, get a hold of somebody that can help you with it. I think every university contact has free access to, well, you do too, but we look at them perhaps more consistently than most farmers would. Keep it simple, keep your basics in mind, design and approach. Definitely take some data or make some notes, take pictures, and then be prepared to do it again. Results from one test may not necessarily represent the results of the second test on your same property. So that's what I have as a summary. I hope that wasn't too long, and we have, I think, some time for conversation.
I was just typing this in the chat, but I'll say it out loud. Would a list of these public reports be something that people on the call would find useful? I can think of a couple right off the top of my head. Like every time there's a SARE project grant, whether it's a farmer rancher grant or something that has a little heavier involvement from the university, Matt's right. There's a public record of it. They have to do a report. If we had like a couple of those resources somewhere where you could get easy access to them, is that something people would be interested in? Is that something worth our time to develop for you?
As I was listening for the responses or waiting, I was thinking my own report to SARE, North Central Region SARE, for the 3-year project that John is familiar with, in which we tested microbial containing biostimulants on research stations and farms in and outside of Ohio over a 3-year period. And all the process that we used and the outcomes that we reported, that's at the SARE website. That's a former, that's a research extension program project. It's all there for you. You just got to go to the SARE website and look for biostimulants or some keyword search, and that project report should come up, and it's right there. You download it, read it, see everything that we reported. There's no like conversion between like the person who prepared it and the person who's going to read it. So it's not like Sarah took it and that did something to it. It's like what I wrote. So yeah, and if you don't like the report, you just call up the person who prepared it. That's another way.
It's true. To Mark's comment in the chat, the search can be a little cumbersome, but
Yeah.
it does have a couple nice filter features. So like if you're looking just for research in Ohio, or you can narrow it down. The problem's finding the right keyword. So it can be difficult.
Right. I do agree. Yes, it is cumbersome. But it will still save some time and effort probably in the long run if you're able to navigate through that. So the results of our poll about how many people have used a biostimulant, I didn't catch the right at the beginning. Is it a majority of people that have used the biostimulant?
No, we've got a crowd of skeptics here.
Okay. All right.
Yeah, so I can share the results on the screen again, I think. Can you see them, Matt?
Yes, now I can.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay.
So yeah, very few people on here that use them regularly, but more that have tried them, and a lot more that are considering them or don't have much experience with them. So yeah, I mean, I've talked to a lot of farmers that swear by them and think that they or that have actually tested and see results from these products. But yeah, I think there's a lot of things. There's a lot of moving parts and how well these work, as you said.
So as far for the folks who are considering using them but haven't, what would help you make a decision? Be more confident in whatever decision you make to like either say no, like right now is not the time, or yes, I would like to go forward at least. Is there anything that stands out to those folks who are considering using? Is there anything that any specific question or issue that you carry with you about using them as you consider that process? Like I'm going to, or I won't go to. Could be anything.
Matt, see your hand up. Go ahead and unmute.
Hi, yeah, I'm not in that category there, but my name's Matt Begley. I do materials review at OFA, and so I've seen some of these kind of products come across my desk, and for the most part, it's pretty straightforward as far as reviewing for organic use. It's especially just talking about like seaweed extracts. That's it's a non-synthetic material. It's pretty straightforward. But recently, I had quite a long conversation with a farmer recently, actually, about cytokinin. And so I'm trying to wrap my head around cytokinins and other plant growth regulators. And I guess I just have a few questions about those. First is like, how effective are they? And then also, how are they regulated, and how does the regulation affect how they're able to be used?
Is everyone comfortable with what a cytokinin is?
Sorry.
Is Matt, do you think the person you're working with and other conversation, when we say cytokinin, are we confident that people know what a cytokinin is?
No. The confusion comes in that most of the product is just seaweed extract, but they have it labeled as an active ingredient is cytokinin. And this person said they've been involved with someone over in Worcester who's been using some of these products maybe. But they're looking only at the biostimulant effects, I believe, of like the inner ingredients, not of what the cytokinins are actually doing as a plant hormone. And maybe I don't understand everything that's going on here, but there is a product in question that lists cytokinin as an active ingredient. And my understanding is that this is an EPA classified as a pesticide, and therefore has certain restrictions on it. Now, practically speaking, I won't get in the weeds here with like organic use and stuff, but that's where a lot of confusion comes in, is like, why is there any sort of restriction on its use? But I'm just trying to understand more about how they work and how they are actually regulated and how they can be used.
You can still see my screen, I think. Is that
Yeah.
right? Okay, so Matt, your comments and questions, I think, are one reason why we're having this conversation. It may need to have more, may benefit us to have more. Well, the biocontrol, biostimulant distinction is very important. If the material is described as a, for lack of a better word, biopesticide, biocontrol, as able to restrict, inhibit, stop the growth of another organism, kill it, it's very likely to be a biocontrol agent. It's very, almost, I think, demanded by law to have an EPA label. It's probably gone through third-party testing, as I mentioned. If it is eligible to be used in certified organic production, then of course its composition and its manufacturing process has to meet that metric. Okay. There are stage gates that must be passed through in order for that product to successfully hit the market. A cytokinin is a plant growth regulator. I don't know why it would be the quote active ingredient in a biocontrol agent. To be quite honest, I may have missed something, but I don't know why a plant growth regulator, naturally occurring plant growth regulator, would be listed as the active ingredient in a product described as providing biocontrol, as opposed to a biostimulant action, which would be, by the virtue of its name, it's supposed to make things bigger, faster, stronger, more resilient because of their natural capacity for that. When that product is introduced to it, it's like us taking vitamins. It's like us taking, eating a protein bar. It's like us, taking things in that will make us more resilient, stronger, faster, more durable, all that. And in that case, much like, to be quite honest, in another slide set that I have on this topic, I do have a picture of a pharmacy with different categories of products in a pharmacy. And then I have a homeopathic establishment. And I think we don't go off on a tangent, but there's regulation of something that the pharmacist has to hand you. But for other products that are sitting on the shelf, maybe not so much.
Yeah.
So, Matt, my point is that I would have to know more about that particular product. I would think the user know more about it. And the general issue, if you will, is that this category of particularly the biostimulants, is so large and so diverse and so not tightly regulated at this moment that many things can be said about almost any product.
Yeah. Okay.
Not so much true when there's a biocontrol component.
Yeah.
Through the EPA process.
Yes. So this product in particular, it's labeled directions and information does not indicate in any way of biocontrol. It really has labeling consistent with a biostimulant. I would say it's preventative, or like not just preventative, but like apply regularly to the soil doesn't have any claims of pesticide, but it is EPA registered. And my understanding in communicating with Omri is that cytokinins are classified as pesticides through FIFRA and somewhere else with EPA labeling requirements. So there's like this, it creates this like problem where under the organic, under certification, it looks like we can, we can allow the use of this product according to its label, but it creates this confusion of like, well, it's not actually a pesticide, but it has this labeling that indicates almost that it is.
Correct. It's a tweener. It is actually, no, it's because of the presence of the cytokinin and the cytokinins being plant growth regulators. FIFRA has determined that it needs to have an EPA label,
Okay.
which tends to shoot it into or place it into the biocontrol.
Yeah.
Although it is not truly a biocontrol agent.
Okay.
Yes.
Are they effective? Do you know anything about that? Is there, so this product, is it gaining effectiveness from cytokinin, or is cytokinin in all seaweed extracts?
I think many, I wouldn't go so far as to say in all.
Okay.
Seaweed, we have to keep in mind what seaweed is. Is seaweed an actual plant?
Generally not.
Generally not.
Yeah.
These are not in the kingdom Plantae.
Yeah.
So, and again, they may be undifferentiated in the sense they're complex products. They're literally seaweed harvested from the ocean. They've something's been extracted from them using various means, various extractants, water or alcohol, chemical, whatever, some concoction. And whatever comes out of that seaweed is then prepared for bottling, shipping, and use. And so it's a naturally occurring, it's a naturally occurring substrate that they're using. And then it's a somewhat tightly controlled process for extraction or fermentation. If it's a fermentation product, that'd be another approach. And then that process may conclude with like a filtration or something like that, just to make it more easily handled. And then if packaged and sent off, there may or may not have been an actual analysis done by people who are qualified to zero in on what the so-called active ingredient is, or ingredients. Okay. What they do have, perhaps, is data showing if we apply it, we get this response. If we don't apply it, we get this response. By comparison, look, it makes the plant more resilient.
Okay.
Grow larger. And we've done a preliminary assessment and found cytokinins in it, or there are other data available to that company that can allow them to actually get that EPA label, right? Because they supply a lot of data to the EPA, and they at some point would have made that discovery, or they would have gone to the library, figuratively speaking, and they would have said, well, somebody else has worked with the species of seaweed that we have. They have done an exhaustive analysis of its composition. We're using the same species. We're going to use their data to describe what's in our product.
Okay.
Okay. I know that for some, this is kind of wonkish and maybe not tied to exactly what they need to hear today to determine if they should use this product, but it's information that may help them appreciate the origin and the potential value of the product to them. Okay. They are biological substrates. I mean, look at the microbial ones. These are fats of trichoderma, mycorrhizae, all of the various bacillus species. If you go to my website, you can see a listing. These are literally huge fats that there's a process going on and to raise these bacteria, fungi. Then they're either packaged alive and teeming with biological activity, or they're putting into a resting state, spores, resting bodies, what have you, put in a package and sent to you. But they're alive, or they should be alive to work, right? And then you go up to the humic substances, the amino acids, the enzymatic extracts. I mean, you have to remember, these are starting as biological substrates. Your beer, all of your beer starts as a biological substrate. I mean, get real, right? There's malting barley, there's water, there's microbes that do the fermentation. But the beer manufacturers have got this down to quite literally a science that allows you to enjoy your favorite beverage and it be the same thing every single time. And there's a whole apparatus out there, as I'm sure you know, to ensure consistency, quality, safety, so on and so forth, right? But it all begins as malting barley, a microbe, and water, and the substrate, corn, rice, wheat, whatever it might be. I'm just using perhaps an example that many are familiar with. And that's kind of the same thing that we're beginning with in these biological products, a biological substrate that may or may not go through the same level of rigor as beer making before being packaged and sent out.
Okay, that makes sense.
A couple more questions on the chat maybe we can get to. First from Bridget, do you feel like the market's mostly targeted towards organic? Do they seem to be more targeted towards vegetable producers? And also, Bridget wonders where do you see compost or compost tea fitting in here?
Two great questions. No, it is not targeted exclusively or preferentially or even highly to organic growers. I think biological products are appealing to a wider spectrum of growers than just organic. Certainly, the organic community has its own incentives for being interested in biological based inputs, but they are not alone in that desire. So the so-called best, the most effective biological products are actually being marketed to non-organic users. Okay, and you see that when you go to the trade shows at the farmer conventions and conferences, you see it in the magazines. Right now, biological products are where it's at, so to speak, in this arena. And those companies would not have the business models that they have if they were marketing solely to organic producers. As far as sector within the agricultural, plant producing world, no, not exclusively horticultural. Certainly, there's a high incentive for some because that's where horticulture producers are very accustomed to spending lots of money to produce an acre of their crop. And so what's another $10 an acre, to some people is the thought process. But when you're spending $18,000 to produce an acre of this or an acre of that, it's easier to market something instead of spend cost $10. But actually, by terms of acreage, of course, the big customers will be the agronomic sector. Pastures, corn, soy, wheat, rice, just by virtue of the sheer magnitude of the acreage and how much could be applied to it. And then the second question was compost and compost teas. Is that right? Yeah, so compost and compost teas in some people's description is a biological input. And I would include them I do include them as biological inputs. What I want to emphasize, however, is that they may not appear in schematics like you're seeing now on your screen. They may or may not, sorry, I forgot where my, they may or may not fall, I don't think they do actually fall within the purview of the regulatory apparatus that is beginning to get set up for these products. So compost has its own regulatory apparatus. Compost teas may fall into this regulatory apparatus because, again, it's an extracted product or it's a product of some sort of manufacturing process. Whereas compost itself, like the Ohio Compost and Manure Management Program that we have here at OSU, there's a whole regulatory apparatus for compost that's separate from the one for this. Broadly speaking, they're both biological inputs, but I don't think compost itself will be within the BPIA or USDA purview? So two really good questions.
Good questions. Ben, you've got your hand up. I'm gonna let you unmute if you're comfortable and ask away.
Problem. Hi, sorry I missed some of the presentation. I put it on the calendar and then forgot about it. But yeah, I mean, I've been interested in these. You know, I've obviously gone to OFA conferences for so many years and since 2007 and seen lots of presentations and so on and so forth on it. I feel like the best advice that I ever got from another researcher was like, deal with all of your other soil fertility, soil drainage, soil issues first, and then use like the bioproducts to squeeze that last 5 or 10% of productivity out of, you know, your crops that you're trying to raise. And I just think that that's a really important piece of information that's often lost, you know, especially presenting to like, you know, wide groups of people, because, you know, you'll run into people in trade shows and so on and so forth who are looking for like the silver bullet that's going to, you know, somehow make their poorly drained soil, you know, their crops produce great on poorly drained soil. And so I think it's really, you know, I you know, like these idea of biostimulants and everything like that. I think it's kind of fascinating, but I think it's important to yeah, always get that you know, I like specifically the idea that they're there for fine-tuning production that's already, you know, where you're trying to squeeze that last little bit of production out of a given acre.
I think it's super well said, and I would concur. I'll just add really briefly is that there are broadly two schools of thought on the use of biostimulants. One is that they take a lower functioning system and raise it, improve it. And the other one is that actually more like what you described, Ben, is it takes a higher functioning system and makes it great. And some of that perspective comes from literature and experience dealing perhaps primarily with phosphorus mobilization and release, especially through the categories of biostimulants that are designed to help with that, you know, mycorrhizae and others. And so, yeah, I would still think that on the whole, regardless of the input factor and the cost factor, to do what you described and what that person was mentioning is a very reliable approach for sure. The reason I hesitated there for a minute is that, you know, people ask me all the time, and others have been asked, if I apply this material to my soil and I already have high fertility, will I actually get any benefit? Or wouldn't the benefit be greater if my soil is at lower fertility? Because testing fertility, that's always a difficult question to answer, and that's why I bring up those two schools of thought. And you know, the most reliable approach would be to test it on a small scale and see what happens.
Geez, Matt, I think I just muted you by mistake.
Right.
Okay. Not me too. I'm gonna get one more question off the chat and then bounce to you, Deb. So this is a really great question from Leslie that, you know, are there major categories for these products? Like if you have a particular thing you're looking to address in your soil, can you look at a guide and say, okay, what can I use for this? I think if I'm not getting that right, Leslie, jump in and correct me.
That is a really good question. And I think the answer is no, Leslie. That would be a really good, useful tool to have. I put this slide up just as an example of where it could go, like the biofertilizer approach, where like it's gonna add some value of NPK or something along those lines to and then there's going to be soil conditioning in some way, but I don't think there is a resource like what you may be describing. And that would be super cool to have one, because it would try to put order to what you're seeing here. Functional order. This is described based on composition or origin. this doesn't say what it does, right? So that would be something that the industry and maybe even USDA would welcome in some way. And of course, some of the producers are going to scream like, hey, we're in all three categories, you know? So, but yeah, no, that's a great question. And I
Is
don't,
there enough data out there to put something like that together, or would that require like an insurmountable amount of trialing?
no, I don't, my humble opinion, hearing this question, which is an excellent one, and then what you just said, my humble opinion is that it should be tried. It should be floated, it should be tried, and it should be make a reasonable attempt and be systematic about it.
Something like a cover crop selection tool, if
But
anyone's.
yeah. So when I put together the so-called bugs in the drug webpage, and I caught a lot of flack for that from some sectors. People said they loved it, even though it has flaws. Because it did make bring some degree of order to the chaos. Okay. So I think I have heard Deb say something along the lines of, doing good before you try to be perfect, or don't let the perfect be the enemy of the good kind of thing. But anyway, yeah, that's a very interesting idea.
Deb, go ahead.
Sounds like a good grant opportunity, Matt. Okay, so I want to kind of engage with Bridget here with this observation and question. Way back when Ben and I were first starting to work with organic farmers, and I'm speaking specifically of the pioneers, Rex and Glenn, his brother, on the spray farm, and also with John Herzl, Bridget, while he was still living. They were the really early pioneers in the agronomic crops. And I recall that both of them used, and I cannot remember the exact name of the product, but it was a soil amendment. And I think it would classify maybe as a biostimulant. It had some kind of microbial action, supposedly. And, they both felt, and we did not test this, so I can't speak, scientifically, but they felt that that was very helpful, particularly during the transition. And, they kind of were the start of a whole thing within OFA and the university and all. So I guess my question to Bridget, do you, you're actively putting fields through transition. Are you guys still using any of those amendments that John did years and years ago? Is Bridget still with us?
I see her on there, but maybe she got called away. I will say, I know from talking to her that they do a lot of compost because they have a nice.
Oh yeah, they make their own, right.
There. So I know that's part of their transition.
These were not, yeah, no, we know, yeah, the compost, that's a great system with using the refuse from the canning, but these were actual products. And they were quite expensive, because I know when we did the farming systems trial at the Herzl site up in Wood County, doing the economics on those systems with those products was a real, the ROI, was, and I'd like to go back and look at it now after this conversation. But so I was just curious if they were still using, that was still part of their transition apparatus. It would certainly speak to the, the strength of what they feel, helps with transition in particular.
Looks like she's driving, so.
Okay, well, sorry.
She has great thoughts in her head and can't get to the unmute button.
Right.
Anyone else have experience with these products that they'd like to share, or questions? We have a little time left, but not much. Okay, Bridget says it is not part of their rotation plan.
Okay.
Just compost. So.
I'd like to
Just-
emphasize this as we get closer to wrapping up, and we've had this very, I think, really substantive conversation on a number of topics, that a good number of the products are and their composition, there is reason to suspect that they may work. That's why I said in that slide, the potential benefits are grounded in some biological principle or fact. Okay. But of course, that doesn't end that doesn't say everything. That doesn't determine what will happen. I think what we maybe are arguing for is a really systematic, as much as possible, systematic, serious, purposeful, mindful approach to identifying perhaps products or circumstances under which the two of those may be best suited for each other, right? Like the question that Ben had about getting everything else right and then to use a biostimulant versus it could help somebody through a transitional period and these sorts of things. Those are still unanswered, at least to my understanding, incompletely answered questions. And if they're priced correctly, the point of entry for many into the use of a biological product is often not, price may not be the barrier for many. Yes, it's a cost, there's no doubt, but the actual cost may not be a barrier, and they watch, obviously manufacturers watch that closely. And then generally speaking, I will say as horticultural producers, vegetable, fruit, and the like, they often have many more opportunities to apply these products because of their management style, meaning you tend to go over the crop, through the crop multiple times per season, whereas in the agronomic sector, that's not so much the case. And so they're trying to load everything on the seed. And they often ask the question, how do we simultaneously inoculate the seed with a beneficial fungus and put a fungicide on the same seed? And, they struggle with these kinds of practical logistical questions, or, because if it's not the seed box or the fertilizer spreader, it may not be applied, right? But in the horticultural side, we have more options. So I'll stop there. But so there's still a lot to be learned about how to use them most effectively from the procedural side and the actual relationship between the product, the crop, and your particular soil.
Well, our time's about up. This has been great. If you have other thoughts or questions, feel free to reach out to us. And yeah, I think we got some good ideas of possible ways to take this. To one of the earlier comments that I didn't respond to out loud, Leslie asked about doing on-farm research and whether that's part of this. And yeah, that's kind of why this group exists. So absolutely, we need to hear from farmers about the effectiveness and the questions they have on these and other products. So thank you, Matt. Thanks everyone for coming, and hope to see many of you at the OFA conference later this month or at our next meeting. I don't have a topic yet to share, but we're always meeting on the first Thursdays, and I did put the website in the chat if you want to check out recordings of past sessions or recordings of this session if you missed anything. And that's about it for today. Thanks, everybody. Thank you, Matt.
Thanks. Have a good one.
Thank you, Matt.
Thanks. Good to see you.